hide that.
So take a seat in the front.
So
Because I
anyway,
think you don't need more than the front.
It's just smaller.
Yeah.
anyway, I see
We're
him,
hearing a story.
I see this face in the subway. I walk up, I say, I know you from someplace, but I
Yeah.
can't place. Well, it was him.
It was
He was living in South Africa, came to New York for a visit. He married a girl in South Africa.
oh my
I
goodness.
gave him, and
And
I
there
said,
he was,
You're
right.
the SOB that I remember.
That's cute, that's cute.
I join you?
Of course, thanks for coming, Robert. Would you like to meet the Slatons?
Hi,
Hi there.
That's
I'm
Gunther,
Gunther.
and this is Sally
Hi.
Slaton.
Very
Sally,
pleased to
Robert
meet you.
Dillon, nice to meet you. I was here talking to Todd about ushering in the context of sort of all the thesaurus, and I saw this event, and I said, I must come.
Yeah,
Good for
it's a
you.
really interesting story.
Did you get a ticket? Sir?
I got a speeding ticket on the way over there.
That would be a different
So
type of problem.
This,
Here, we'll put this
this
back
is a
over here.
prize.
Yeah, you should see, well, it's actually, you should take a look at it. This was, what did
May I
I
pick
drop?
this up?
No,
Sure.
absolutely, are you
That was
kidding?
his father's.
Oh,
I can pick it up, Gunther.
This was issued by who?
by the German Wehrmacht, the German military, because you needed that because Hitler said only those that served in World War I were eligible to have a business.
I went,
Hi there.
do you know Ralph Bergen?
Ra-
He ushers here, we were just in a meeting, ushers here all the time. His brother, after the war, he was a technical fellow, and he went to Nuremberg, and he helped set up, he was an engineer, and he was a sound engineer. He helped set up the communication so that when
The trial thing,
trial, that
the Americans had all the
they
translations.
could have the instantaneous translation, which was mimicked and still used today in the United Nations. It's the same sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Isn't
setup.
that interesting?
So he was there and he got to witness that firsthand, and he gave a talk at the Holocaust Museum. So it was
Interesting.
You know, what's interesting is, we went back under restitution, and he asked to see the mayor, the Burgermeister in Berlin, and asked him if there was a book about who was put in the concentration camps, okay? And he says, oh, yeah, we have this interesting
There
great
you
book,
go,
3
okay.
volumes,
Krauss
this
book.
thick, like this and like this, of listing all the people that their age, what town they came from, what concentration camp they were in, and when they were murdered.
Oh,
And
don't
so
sit
we
back there.
pulled
Annie and Layla, can you come sit up here?
a couple of pages out of his relatives, and none of them survived. And then not one.
Yeah, but can you imagine keeping such a
Those kind
record?
of records.
I took a course
Nice to see you.
when I was 100 years ago, when I was in college. It was when they first started teaching a history class as a Holocaust class. It was a 3-credit history class.
I know.
My best friend at the same time was at Boston University, taking the same class, but he had a better teacher. His teacher was Elie Wiesel.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I said, you had
Where'd you go to school?
University of Maryland.
Maryland.
So we're waiting for our students to arrive. They should be here soon. So we're just chit-chatting. There's really nothing for those of you who are joining us on the video to hear at this point. Although I can start asking our students, do you know what the occasion is that we are commemorating today? Did you say something there? Yes, so it is something related to the Holocaust, and we'll talk about it. I'll introduce it that way. It's called Kristallnacht, which is, does anybody know what Kristallnacht refers to? It's a good German word. Kristallnacht. the night of the broken, yes, night of the broken glass. Nacht is night, exactly, a good German word, but not a good event. So it's, Kristallnacht is, occurred on November 9th and 10th, because it started in the evening and went well into the next day. And it was a night that a lot of stores, the windows of stores of Jews were broken, synagogues were burned, Jews were taken away, particularly men. And it was a turning point in what was happening in Hitler's Germany, from something that was, I would say, more peaceful, not necessarily better or less malicious, because the laws were changing, and there was a lot of ridiculing and teasing and separating of the Jews from others. But it was a turning point in terms of the amount of violence that occurred with the Holocaust. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
So it's an important date in history, and one of the reasons, this is just a pragmatic thing, that we have moved our time that we remember the Holocaust in our school to focus on Kristallnacht, as opposed to Yom HaShoah. Does anybody know what Yom HaShoah is? Yes. So Yom HaShoah is the Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is usually April or May, which means that often we are either done with school or almost done with school. So we want to make sure that every year our students in the 5th through 7th grades have the opportunity to be part of a commemoration of the Holocaust. And it's an opportunity not only for us to have a little service to remember those who perished in the Holocaust, but also for us to give witness to what happened. And we are so, so fortunate that there are still people like Gunther Slaton, who lived in Germany during some of the terrible things that happened, but who continue to be alive and thrive and able to tell their stories to us today. So Mr. Slaton said, you know, when we were first talking, he said, well, Steven Spielberg Project had interviewed him for many hours, and they came up with a beautiful 19-minute video. He said, should I show that? I said, no, no, no. Don't show the video, because the video we can watch some other day. But the opportunity to really meet you in person, we're not going to have that forever. And so it's really, you know, there are people who were present to unfortunately be part of and give witness to the terrible events that occurred in Germany and around Europe. So we are waiting still for a parent and a student. Yeah, maybe you'll go get them because they're a little bit late already. Yes, I am. Yes, not necessarily absolutely everything, but yes, 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 absolutely. Welcome, welcome. So the video is available through the Illinois Holocaust Center. Yes. Is it archived in any way that?
Well, I don't know. I have a copy of it. I don't know how they catalog it, but they have. I assume if you ask for my name, or that they will show it to you, because I think they have. Here's the thing. They interviewed many people, and not too many were still with it. And so when they interviewed me, they did it for 3-4 hours because I was still with the program. So The video is in 3 parts.
Are you one of the holograms at the Illinois Holocaust Museum?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we know that they have the holograms that are interactive. The Spielberg project, I think, transcended any museum. I think he started it independently, and maybe that then became associated with the museum. Does that make sense? Because his effort was to get the stories of every Holocaust victim. I mean, I know of people in our community who did interviews, as well as those who were interviewed. Are we all here now? Okay, excellent. So we are live video streaming. I want everybody to know that. As you can say hello now. I don't know that anybody's watching us, but we are live video streaming, which means we're also taping this presentation. And Mr. Slaton did a similar presentation yesterday, and I hope that we will keep a copy of one of the presentations in our archives so that we will have access to his story in addition to what we may be able to get at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. So for those of you who may be joining us by video, I'm Roberta Goodman. I'm the Education Director here at North Shore Congregation Israel. And today we are commemorating Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht meaning, anybody? You guys now should know, right? What's Kristallnacht mean? The night of the broken glass, thank you. Which was a night on November 9th and November 10th in 1938. It's a long time ago, right? 1938, who's going to do the math for me? 80 years ago, right? So this is the 80th anniversary. And it was a night when it's called the Night of Broken Glass because a lot of stores, windows that were owned by Jews, the stores that Jews owned, their glass was broken. It was a night that many synagogues were burned. It was a night that, and Torahs, that, although you have an interesting story, I'd never heard that story before. There were Torahs that were literally left in the streets that became destroyed, taken out of the synagogues. It was a day where, unfortunately, many Jews, particularly men, were taken away. So it's a night that it was a night that we remember, or a day that we remember, because it was a turning point in what happened in the Holocaust. Because when Hitler came to power officially in 1933, or 32, depending on how you look at it, much of what he did was to change laws. And there were things that happened where people were acting in anti-Semitic ways. What does anti-Semitism mean? Or against Jews. That's right. And there were ways that people were acting against Jews, but most of them were not as violent as this particular night. And so in many ways, Kristallnacht was a turning point in the Holocaust because it was a day that violence was allowed to happen. And many of the authorities in Germany did nothing to prevent it or to stop it. If anything, they encouraged it. Okay, this is a very important point. So this is our opportunity to learn about the Holocaust as a group and to commemorate it. So first we're going to be hearing from Gunther Slaton, and this is his wife, Sally. Sally is not from the Holocaust. She was not from Germany. Mr. Slaton was from Germany. He's going to tell us that story of his life, share his personal story. Then there will be time for questions, and then we will have a commemoration. So that's why we have the Yahrzeit candles. A yahrzeit candle is you light in, why do we light yahrzeit candles usually? Yes, to remember somebody who died, somebody, a relative or somebody who passed away that's dear to you. And we have the 6 candles for the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. And so we will have a brief service afterwards as our commemoration, which, by the way, we end with a note of hope. And that is, we sing Hatikva, which is the Israeli national anthem, and Hatikva means the hope. Because that's what Hitler tried to destroy the Jews. The fact that we're here today is in defiance of what he attempted to do. And so every time you are proud to be a Jew or act out the values that you have learned as part of your Jewish heritage, you are doing an act of defiance to Hitler, and an act, hopefully, that's one of joy and meaning to each of you. So without further ado, Mr. Slaton,
Okay.
if you would share with us, start by telling us your story from when you were in Germany.
How old is this group? 12?
This group is, these are 5th and 6th graders. They're 11, 12, maybe 1 or 2 13-year-olds. 10. We have a 10-year-old as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
The reason I asked that question, I came here when I was 12 years old. I came to the United States. I didn't speak a word of English. But most importantly, I only had German shorts, short pants. And the kids said I was a Nazi because I wore short pants. And I told my parents I wouldn't go to school anymore unless I got long pants. And that was the greatest thing that happened to me, is to get one pair of long pants, because they thought I was Hitler coming to the United States. So that's how we started. I came in April 1938. I was just a little over 12 years old. I was bar mitzvah in New York, at Temple Anshe Chesed. We learned of Kristallnacht. That's the German Kristallnacht. Destruction of all the Jewish stores and synagogues from relatives that were still there. The Germans, well, let's just review this. Hitler came to power in 1933, and the first thing he did was burn the Reichstag, burn the Congress in Germany. At first, we knew he was anti-Semitic, but he didn't have this viral anti-Semitism at first. He created the notion that Jews had all the money and that Germans were starving because the Jews had taken the money. Now, the background is that they had lost the war in 1914 to 18, and the Allies had put tremendous payments on Germany. And they had an inflation so that a book of matches would cost 1 million marks during that period, and that what started the situation. And the other thing that happened in Germany, they had so many parties: Communist Party, Socialist Party, the Democratic Party, Social Democratic. In other words, they had the majority, but they're fighting each other. So that when Hitler came with a minority, he became the majority because he was the only party that stood up. And his theme was kill the Jews. Jews had plundered all the money from the Christians in Germany, and that they would have a good life if they got all the money that the Jews had. That was basically the understanding. Now, it developed. 1933, he didn't do much. 34, he said that all the Jewish people that came to Germany from other countries could not work in Germany. There was immigrants that came from Poland and Russia, Ukraine, to Germany, had to leave. As it turned out, they were the lucky ones because they left long before the pogroms hit in Germany. My father had 3 stores in Germany, men's clothing store. The 3 stores, one was to make suits to measure. Another one was for workers' uniforms. And then the 3rd store was for suits and coats. Quite a thriving business. It was in business for many, many years. It was the 3rd generation when my father took it over. He had a brother who was a doctor. Now, Hitler then set up a situation and said, German Jews that were in World War I could be in business, and doctors and attorneys that were in World War I, served in World War I, could continue. So that meant that 2nd or 3rd generation Germans, so-called Germans at that point, Jews, could continue. I'll forget that one. As a result, the German Jews were quite industrious, owned businesses. We lived in a very relatively small town of 20,000 people. Everybody knew each other. We had a small synagogue, for all denominations of Jews, but we had a cantor that served as a rabbi. And we went to religious school twice a week. And things continued even under Hitler for some time. Now, he came to power in 33, 34, 35. Yes, they had papers about Jews, but it didn't affect in a small town because everybody knew a good Jew, so it was all right. Then in 37, my father and my mother went to Palestine, which is now called Israel, to see if they could get affidavits and a visa to live in Palestine, which is now Israel. Well, of course, the British had the oversight of Palestine, and they would not accept any more Jews because the Arabs objected to any more Jews coming to Palestine. So they came back from a tourist trip and continued on. So the day or 2 days after they came back, the police station asked my father if he would come to the police station. They wanted to check his passport. Well, when he came there, it was more than checking his passport. They really wanted to find out if he had transferred any money from German marks going to Israel, Palestine. And he had not, but they kept him. He thought he would be there 5-10 minutes and check the passport. He didn't come back. My mother went crazy, and there was nothing you can do because even an attorney could not, because it was in the hands of the German secret police. So he was locked up for the night, and luckily, the police chief came by that night to see my father locked up in jail, and he said to him, "Max, what are you doing here?" My father said, "I always come here for my vacation." And he said to him, "I don't want to be rough on you, but this is no kidding. You got to leave. I'm going to let you leave, but you got to get out of town right now, because all these people here are going to concentration camp, but you're going to leave. And you're going to leave right now, but you're also going to leave the little town you're in and not come back." So that's how we left. Now, here we were in Berlin, went to a cousin's house. They had 2 kids like my brother and myself, quite well-to-do. And he said to my father, he served in the army with my father. He was a doctor. And he said, "Why are you leaving this country? We'll outlive this guy forever. You're nuts for leaving." My father said, I don't like it here. This is not the way I can live." And he said, "You're crazy. You're absolutely crazy." Well, to move ahead, he was one that was killed in the concentration camp. But so now we're in Berlin, and we're trying to get out. We went to Argentina, the Argentina consulate, Brazil, Australia, anywhere. We couldn't get out, could not get out, because now the things got so bad that I've forgotten how many Jews we had in Germany. A couple 100,000 Jews all wanted to get out now, and it was impossible. So my father went to the United States consulate and asked if to get a visa to come to the United States for 4 people. And they said, "What proof do you have that you're not going to be on welfare? You need, in those days, you needed an affidavit, have people guarantee that you would not be on welfare, that if you were penniless, they would take care of you." Well, we had some relatives here, but they couldn't give us an affidavit. So here he is in the consulate, and finally the General Counsel of Berlin, the American Council, said to my father, "Do you have any Goldmark?" You see, in Germany they had 2 currencies. One was the regular mark, and one was called Goldmark that was backed by gold. And that was the real currency. And he said, "Would you have maybe 20,000 Goldmark?" My father said, "I think we could scrape that," because everything was under control. And he scraped it together and brought 20,000 Goldmark to the consulate. And he said, "We'll put that in diplomatic pouch. And so when you get to America, it'll be waiting for you." Well, it's still waiting for us. I mean, that was the $20,000 that went into somebody's pocket to give us a visa, but it wasn't our pocket. So we came here essentially penniless. My mother, who had a couple of maids, she went to work at a company called Rokic that makes kosher foods. She was making honey jars, and her hands were so delicate they had to give her special gloves because she had blisters all over. And my father, who ran these 3 stores, he found a job in a restaurant cutting and peeling onions. And he stunk so bad when he came home, My mother made him undress because it smelled from onions. But that's how we got started. My mother went to Oakridge. My father went to restaurant. I went to school. They put me in 6th grade. Are these 6th graders? Are you in 6th grade? What are you in, 7th? What is it? Okay. Well, they put me in 6th grade because that was the age that I belonged. And they were doing simple arithmetic, adding and subtracting. We were doing equations in Germany. Far ahead in education. Very strict education. So they put me in 6th grade, and of course I couldn't communicate what I really knew, but sooner or later they found, doing the arithmetic, adding and subtraction was really no problem. So they said, this kid belongs. They put me in what they called rapid advanced classes. And this, well, anyway, make a long story short, I was in 9th grade before the year was up. And then one interesting thing happened at that point. I had a French-German teacher who I loved because she was my translator. I always ran to her when I had a problem because I could tell her my problem and she would intercede for me. And she said to me, "You're a smart kid. Why don't you apply to a high school in New York called Stuyvesant High School?" That was for technical high school, and you had to have a better than 80 average to apply. And if you didn't continue with the 80 average, they transferred you to some other high school. So I took the test. It was 2 days of test. One was the math and physics, what you knew at that point, and the other was English. And they came back to the school and they said there's something wrong with this kid. He scored in the 90th percentile in the math and physics, almost 0 in English. And they said, "Stupid head, he doesn't read English too well." So they gave me another test, and I went into Stuyvesant. Now, that was interesting. Very, very hard school to get into. And if you didn't keep a B average, at least a B average, they transferred you. So in New York, in New York State, they had what they called Regents Exams. At the end of the course, you had to take a regent, which was a statewide regents, and you had to have an 80 score to maintain your seat at Stuyvesant. So what I did, I took a 4-year French and 4-year German regents, and that gave me the points to move ahead, because then I went to summer school to catch up on English, because English was way behind. I had scores in German and French, but I didn't have the English, so I went to summer school, and I graduated Stuyvesant before I was 16. A friend of mine at Stuyvesant said, "Why don't we apply for a scholarship at the University of Wisconsin?" I frankly didn't know about Wisconsin, but he said, let's try to get into University of Wisconsin. And we both took the exam. I got in, he didn't, even though he was the guy that said to take the exam. And that's how I got to University of Wisconsin. I enrolled as a engineering program, and I graduated, but 18 and a half, I was out of the University of Wisconsin.
You may want to mention your parents thought you went to Indian country.
Yeah, my parents, when I said I'm going to Wisconsin, they said, normal kids go to NYU or Columbia, you're going to Indian country. they didn't know where Wisconsin was, but as a matter of fact, they sent my older brother with me. We took the overnight train, never forget it, the Pacemaker from New York to Chicago, and then took another train to Madison. So that, now in Madison, it was very interesting. Even there, because I went to Stuyvesant, my first year I could have slept through because the chemistry and the physics and the math were really review what we had in Stuyvesant. So it was really first year was easy for me, and then of course it became more difficult as it went on. But and incidentally, we had a speech class in Wisconsin, and everybody had to tell them their first name. And I said, my name is Gunther. He said, Gunther. He says, don't you know we call German fried potatoes home fries now? Your name can't be Gunther in this class. So they called me Gilbert. So that's how it started, as Gil Slaton. So anyway, that's basically the conversion of me becoming an American.
So maybe you want to tell us what you did professionally.
Well, I professionally, my very first job out of school was at U.S. Steel in Lorain, Ohio. And the reason I took that job, I had a number of offers, was they said, we'll pay for a trip to New York every month. And I said, terrific, I'm on. So, and that was the most interesting job I ever, it didn't last very long, but interesting job because to seeing how steel is made and what these steel workers had to go through to keep the job in those days, worked with open fires and really something else. That's a story in itself. But I eventually worked my way through a number of jobs, but ended up in General Foods and became the general manager of the Jello division of foods. It was a $400 million division because it was Jello and puddings and all the other things that they made. So that's, and then I had several other jobs, but that was the biggest one that I had to build my career.
And you were the first Jew at some company.
Yeah, they asked me, I was at a meeting, and someone came up to me and said, you know, we could use someone like you. And I said, where are you from? He said, General Foods. And he said, why don't you, let's have lunch and I'll introduce you. And I said, okay. It was just a couple of miles. And I went over there and they hired me, right? I mean, I didn't fill out any papers. I said, well, before you hire me, I want to let you know I take 3 days in addition to my vacation. They said, I wanted them to know that I was Jewish because they didn't have any Jews. I was the first Jew hired because General Foods was located in Battle Creek, Michigan. That was their headquarters, as well as Kellogg. That's another story, but they're making Post cereal in Battle Creek. So they said, why do you need 3 days? And I said, I'm Jewish. Okay, no problem. And there was no problem. I thrived, and I became, through various ranks, became the general manager of the Jello division, which was a $400 million division.
And could you tell us, we know, or I know, that you were invited by the German government to return to Germany?
My father was.
Oh, your father was, and what did he say?
My father was, after the war ended, they had what they called reparations, and he was asked to return, that they would make sure that the factory and the business would be returned. And my father told them, I'm never going to set foot in Germany again, ever. So they gave him a retirement plan, but he would never. They invited him to come to Germany as a visitor, and he told them what they could do with their invitation. It was so bitter, because all the relatives were lost. We were the only ones, because you see what happened in Germany. All the foreign Jews and the poor Jews left. The wealthy and people that had tremendous careers like doctors and lawyers stayed to the bitter end, and it became a bitter end, because at the end, the end was the end.
So we know you, but you did go to visit Germany. You want to share when you went to Germany to visit and what you found there?
We went there.
What I found in Germany.
When you went to visit, and we decided it was, what, the 1980s or 90s?
My impressions of Germany when we visited.
Well, why did you go back? Why were you willing to go back? We know your father wasn't willing.
Oh.
It's about Berlin. I'm talking to the Burgermeister.
Well, I asked, when I was in Berlin, Sally and I went at their invitation to go to Berlin, and I asked if they had a record of what they did to the Jews, which I really didn't expect to get a good answer. And they said, oh, yes. We have a book, several books, of every Jew that was arrested, that went to a concentration camp, and when they were born, and when they went to the concentration camp, and when they died. And this is one of the pages of...
3 gray books, this thick and this big. I'm sorry. It was what they call their gray book, and there were 3 volumes, this thick and about this big, with 78 names per page. And you can imagine how small the type is on here, how many people were in those books. It's amazing, the detail that the Germans kept on what they did. It's amazing.
So do we have some questions? Hopefully we have questions. Yes.
You said that your dad was in jail, and the police officer said, Max, you got to get the heck out of town, like, immediately. But you never said, did you go in a car? Did you go on a train? How did you actually leave? Did you bring anything with you? Did you pack your belongings? I know they lied to you and said there'd be $20,000 waiting, but how long did it take to get that money, and how many days after the... Well, I know you didn't get the money, but how many days after the cop told your dad that you need to get out, did you actually get out? How long did that journey take you, and how? How did you go?
Good question. We left all our belongings, and we had other people pack. We didn't go back, but had other people pack certain things that we would take with us for us. Now, how long did it take? 6 months. No, okay. We wanted to leave the next day, but we couldn't, because it took that long to get a visa. we went, I didn't, but my father went to all these countries, Argentina, Brazil, you name it, and they were closed. An American said, we can only take you if you have relatives that guarantee and that's why we came up with the money to get us out of the country, because there were 4 of us, my mother, my father, my brother, and myself.
When he got out of jail,
Yeah,
did he leave that next morning?
the same night that he got out of jail. A couple of hours later, we were packed up and left.
By car or by train?
By car.
By car.
We had a car. We went straight to Berlin to stay with a cousin who had a big house in Berlin.
But
Yeah, were killed.
Right,
They
they
had
stayed.
2 kids the same ages as my brother and myself, and my father and he were very close. As a matter of fact, he was a practical joker, and I won't go into that. But he said to my father, "You're absolutely nuts. You're nuts for leaving."
no, I learned yesterday, somebody asked the question yesterday, so you left the police station, but there were people who saw you in the police station. How come nobody came looking for you after the head of the police said go? Because there were other people there as well.
Well, he was in a cell in the middle of the night, left. I can't give you a good answer for that, because the reason that he knew my father is because we made all the uniforms for the police, state police and local police. So he knew him by first name and said, "I'm protecting you to get out."
Did you tell us that he actually tore up the order for your arrest or your father's arrest? So that there was no record?
I can't tell you that.
Can't remember, okay. Yes.
I was wondering, I know you grew up in like a small village. Were there any other Jewish families that you knew of that were able to get out? Or after you did leave, did you find anyone, any friends or family members, or maybe friends of family members that did escape to America, and did you ever connect with them?
The answer is we were incognito because we didn't want anyone to know that, the 6 months we were there, we were really just people without a country as far as we were concerned.
When you came to
When
the
I
United
came
States.
When we came to America, what was your question?
When you came to America, were there any Jewish families like from the area where you're from in Germany that also made it to America?
My mother had cousins, very Orthodox Jews. They came to meet us in Ellis Island, and that was interesting, Ellis Island. But they came to meet us, and they put us up in their apartment long enough for us to find. As a matter of fact, we found some rooms in the same building as they were staying. And in New York, there was a colony of refugees, German Jewish refugees. That's where Kissinger lived, and that's Washington Heights, right on the Hudson River. And we found an apartment there. And my brother and I would be in charge of the apartment because my folks left early in the morning. So that was the story.
Other questions? Yes, Hope, I'm coming. Then Ari, after Hope. Then Zoe.
When you came to America at school, were you ever teased for being Jewish, or was that only in Germany?
Well, I couldn't.
Were you ever, when you came to the United States and went to school, were you ever teased for being Jewish?
If I was, I couldn't tell you because I didn't speak enough English to, but not really, not really. I befriended some people, and after I had long pants, they became my friends, and they really were my translators at times. But no, I did not experience that.
Because remember, it wasn't just short pants, but short German-looking type pants. Ari?
Have you ever gotten in trouble by a Nazi?
Did you get in trouble by a Nazi when you were living in Germany?
No, I was 12 years old. I can tell you this. I do remember an incident when the Hindenburg went up in smoke in the United States. They blamed the Jews, and the teachers at the gymnasium that they said the Jews are to blame that our Hindenburg airship blew up. And that was a very tough day. They said, you're Jewish and you blew up our Zeppelin.
I was wondering why you and your family decided to leave your possessions behind.
Why did you leave your possessions behind?
Because they wouldn't allow us to take, other than the clothes and some belongings. That was the rule in Germany, that the Jews had to leave everything behind. That the state prohibited anything of value to be taken.
Do you know how much relatives died?
Do you know how many of your relatives died?
I can't give you a number, but all the relatives on both sides of my mother and father are deceased. My father's and my father's brother are the only ones that escaped. All the cousins from both sides, from my mother and my father, were eliminated.
That's all in that gray book that we saw when we were in Zerbst.
Right, because they went searching for the relatives. Does everybody understand that? And that's where they found them, unfortunately listed in a gray book.
When you first found out that you had to move to America, what were your thoughts?
When you first found out you had to leave Germany and move somewhere and move to America, what were your first thoughts?
Hard to say as a youngster, but one of the kids I talked to said to me, do you know when it's daylight, it's going to be night in the United States? And I said, like, how could that be, you know? And he said, do you know that you're not going to be able to talk German to these people in the United States? But that's all I remember, because we were so involved with the life of my father and mother that we didn't really know too much what was going on. Except for the incident with the airship blowing up, I didn't feel anything of pogrom in school.
So you were able to stay in a German school when you were a child? You weren't made to go to a separate school?
Can you say that again, please?
When you were still in Germany,
Yes.
you went to school you stayed in the school you were in?
Yes.
You didn't have to go to a school just for Jewish children?
No.
Okay.
No, they were.
Okay,
probably
last couple questions. Ooh. Go ahead.
Considering your experience and that by emigrating, it saved your life, what do you think about immigration in the United States today, and how our executive branch is dealing with immigrants and people in distress, does that ring a special bell or tug at your heart in a special way, or is there anything you could say that might make us understand or feel better or feel?
The answer is absolutely. I think our immigration policy stinks to a great extent. I'm not saying that open, as you can read in the papers, I'm not for open borders, but I am cognizant of the fact that we're making it very difficult. If this were still Hitler versus what's going on today, we would not be able to come to the United States under these regulations now. And I think it's very sad to see this and being a political football. And you remember the time we were already here, several weeks after that, Jewish people tried to come to the United States and turned back a boat of 600 people. Exactly, and that was under Roosevelt. And they were all killed, every single one of those people. So, yes, what you're asking is very much at my heart today. And I regret that we're going regressively, because if this were happening today in Germany, I doubt that we would come out. Did I answer your question?
How were your parents feeling, and were they worried about something that was going to happen in America?
Were your parents worried about anything happening to you in America?
Were your parents worried about anything happening to you in America?
No, the answer is no, because they felt that we're coming to a free country and that we would be accepted. That all we're asking for is that we're not prevented from doing anything because of your religion.
When did you first meet your wife?
How did you meet your wife?
That's a secret.
Okay, I guess that's not going on the video. All right, very last question, and then we're going to have our commemoration. You guys have been asking really good questions.
I was just wondering, the police officer, the chief, the one who basically saved your family, when you went back to Germany, was any of his children alive, and did you talk to them and basically tell them that, because of him, you were saved?
Well, no, the answer is no, but he was probably in his 60s at the time, and I did go back to the city of birth, Zerbst. Our house was bombed out, and I spoke the language again to people, but I can't say that we ever had any dealings. Now, I can tell you this much. In Berlin, there was at the night of Kristallnacht, they burned all the temples, and the fire chief of Berlin sent a fire department with the fire truck out to kill the fire, even though he had been instructed not to move the truck. He moved it, and he saved the Torahs and buried the Torahs in the ground. And he fled the next day to go to Switzerland because he would have been killed by Nazi Germany. But they found the Torahs after the war, and they were saved, and they're in use today.
It is an amazing story. Thank you, Gunther, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And helping us bear witness to the Holocaust and commemorate it. Is there anyone among our students who had family members? Oh, thank you, I forgot something. Would you like to say something?
We brought you these flowers of the shirts that they wore when they went to concentration camp, of the yellow for the stars you wore on your shirts.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Otherwise we won't see you. And today we're going to have a commemoration. So is there anyone whose family either left Germany or Eastern Europe who was involved, your family was directly involved in the Holocaust? Please come forward. You don't know? Then come on forward. Your great-grandpa, come on forward. Right. I mean, some people escaped. Some people were in concentration camps and survived. And if you have a family member, please come join us. Yours came from Poland, okay. Russia, let's just come on forward. And not only are we going to commemorate those who were murdered, the 6 million who were murdered in the Holocaust just because they were Jews, but there were 11 people murdered in Pittsburgh not so long ago just because they were Jews. So we will say Kaddish, the prayer in remembrance of those who have died, together. I ask you to all please rise.
No.
It's for those who can rise to please do so. And let's recite the Kaddish together. Yit Kadal, V'yit Kadash, Shmei Rabbah. V'alma Divra Kirute, V'milch Malchute. V'chayachon, Uv'yomechon, Uv'chaye Dekol Beit Yisrael. Va'agala, Uv'man Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mivarach Le'olam Almei Almaya Yit Barach V'yishtabach V'yit Pa'ar V'yit Naseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalel Shemei Dekudasha Brichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran bialma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. And together we end with the message of hope that is captured in Hatikva, which it means the hope. And we will face east, which most of us are facing east now anyway, as we face towards Jerusalem. So please join with me. Kol b'leva penima nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ufate Mizrach Kadima Ein Letzion Sophia Od Lavda Tikvatenu Hatikva Shanot Alpayim Liotam Hoshi Be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liotam Hoshi Be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. May we all be a free people. May we never take that freedom for granted. I hope all of your parents voted and all your relatives voted yesterday. It's an act of expression to make sure that democracy exists and that we can be a free people in the United States and hopefully and in Israel and in other places. And thank you to you, Mr. Slaton, for helping to set us free. Thank you. And 5th and 6th graders, you can give your sheets to a teacher at the door. And I'm sorry, one more instruction. Sorry. Drew, hold it. Hold it. One more thing. As you leave, Mrs. Horwitz will take you into Frank Memorial Hall, because in Frank Memorial Hall, we have, you see the Torah, not the cover of a Torah, but the Ark cover like this?